Hi, my name is Phil. I like to talk about politics, and I had to leave my review of yesterday's opening or reopening or continuation of Parliament, depending on how you'd like to think of it. And what I want to talk about is, I suppose, a little bit about what Boris Johnson was going on, but much more about a little gambit that's come into play or may have come into play. But first, if you find yourself enjoying the video, then please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. So Boris Johnson, of course, unsurprisingly, I mean, given the way Geoffrey Cox was behaving, he was, of course, much more extreme. In fact, there were a number of MPs had to told him to moderate his language because it was very incendiary. You know, they were reminding him, we have had an MP murdered, and his response was pretty much to say, well, if you don't want to be murdered, you should do as I say. Words to that effect. But we don't need to really talk about what he was saying, because the aim was just, he's desperate. I mean, I was saying this yesterday. He's utterly desperate. He is absolutely dependent now on somehow, treating the opposition like children, where he browbeats them as if, mocking their manhood until they give him his election before the extension. And all they have to do is go, no, you give us the extension, then you can have the election. In fact, there was a really good comment on one of my videos yesterday. I thought it was excellent. I did actually tweet it off to Jeremy Corbyn and co. Because Boris Johnson is going, when he's asked about, this is a Brexit issue. General elections, of course, are about a range of issues. If you want the Brexit issue to be settled by the people, you issue a public vote. And he said, another referendum would be an insult to the 17.4 million people. To which, one of the viewers from yesterday's video said, well, if another referendum is an insult to the 17.4 million people, how come another general election before the 5 years up isn't an insult to the 46 million people who voted in the last general election, believing that it was going to last for 5 years via the Fixed Terms Parliament Act? But anyway, the gambit is this. If Boris Johnson can get his election before the extension, he will intend to have Parliament dissolved at the time when he's supposed to seek the extension, and therefore, of course, won't. Parliament needs to be in session at this time to make sure he complies with the law. And there are a few things being said, especially in light of the way that Boris Johnson is clearly going to conduct himself now, with no decorum at all, with very incendiary language, very dangerous language. And this could actually end up hastening his humiliation. But it sounds like a cunning plan could be in order. I may have oversold that. I need to be a little bit careful here. There may be a cunning plan. I don't want to oversell it. It may, in the end, not be workable. It may just turn out to be a plan so stupid that Dominic Cummings himself may have come up with it. But there were a couple of things I was listening to. So here's the idea. So up until now, the way Boris Johnson has tried to get the opposition to support a general election before the extension is by putting forward a motion under the Fixed Terms Parliament Act. That needs 2/3 of MPs to vote in favour of it. So this was easy for the opposition. They just abstained. And that's it. Johnson, even though technically you could say he won the vote, he didn't win the vote because there's a threshold needed. It's not a simple majority vote. What Boris Johnson is proposing to do now is issue a bill for a general election, because although the normal way to have a general election, there's 3 ways via the Fixed Terms Parliament Act. If it's 5 years since the last one, of course, you have to have a general election. If 2/3 of MPs vote for one, then you have a general election. Or if a government is defeated in a vote of no confidence and 14 days later, no other government or the previous one hasn't been supported, then you have a general election. But Boris Johnson is going to put forward a motion for a bill that just says, let's have a general election. Fine, can do that. MPs can do that. And that, of course, would only need a simple majority. So he thinks he's being clever here because the opposition would then, abstaining wouldn't do. They'd actually have to vote against it. But of course, at the moment, with the stakes being as high as they are, they just would. And if he taunts them again by saying, why won't you go to the people? They'll just say, why don't you go to the people? Why don't you issue a public vote? And if you want a general election, fine by us. They said that today. Jeremy Corbyn said that today. And the SNP and everyone, I think. Fine by us. Extension. Do the extension. Here's the thing, though. Imagine this. So, Boris Johnson issues this motion. Okay? Obviously, you would think the opposition parties are going to vote against it. What if they don't? What if they vote for it? What if they vote for it? Now, that's not playing into his hands. That doesn't mean there's going to be a general election before the extension. Here's the thing. What if then on the second reading, that's when you can put amendments in? So you put some amendments in. For example, if you have a general election according to the Fixed Terms Parliament Act, it's just a normal general election. The rules are already stated. It just happens as normal. If you do a bill, you can actually change things up. How about giving the vote to 16 and 17-year-olds, for example? The Conservatives really struggle with the votes of the young, but all of the opposition parties, SNP, Lib Dems, Greens, come to think of it, Labour, they'd all be up for that. They get way more support amongst the young than the Tories do, and the Brexit Party come to that. So they could do that. But then this isn't solving the problem because Boris Johnson will still want his general election before he has to go for the extension. So how about this? Oh, well, hang on a minute. If we're going to have 16 and 17-year-olds vote, that's not normal. We're going to have a registration process to make sure that they can vote. That's going to take some time. So you put in an amendment that says that Parliament cannot be dissolved for this general election before, let's say, the 7th of November, to give time for the registration of 16 and 17-year-olds to take place. Then you've scuppered him. You've voted for his bill. He's actually won a bill, by the way. He's now a Prime Minister that has at last won a vote in Parliament, but it does the opposite of what he wants him to do. He doesn't get his general election before he has to go for the extension. And when the election does come around, there's going to be an age group voting that proportionally are going to vote out of all proportion to the other parties than the Conservatives and Brexit Party. I mean, I love it. I don't know whether it's possible, but I love it. Now, there is another thing as well, because at the moment, I'm not sure that they're thinking about this. I heard Jeremy Corbyn, for example, talk today about once the extension is secured, that he will issue a vote of no confidence. So he's going to have the general election normally. I think, I think they should consider this. I mean, Labour would definitely benefit from having 16 and 17-year-olds vote. But then there's another idea floating as well. This has got nothing to do with an election. It's for the extension. So there's a lot of MPs at the moment. They're looking at the behaviour of Boris Johnson and his government. It's really volatile the way they're behaving. They don't really want to wait till October the 19th for this. They don't want to wait that long. He is going to become increasingly desperate and ill-mannered. He's basically like a child throwing a tantrum in the hope that the mother or the father will just acquiesce to its demands to stop the panic. Obviously, they mustn't do that. And I'm sure they won't do that. But at the same time, they need the tantrum to stop. It's really bad. So I think it might have been Joe Swinson of the Lib Dems mooting this idea. But again, this is something that maybe all of the opposition parties will definitely want to get on board with, which is suggesting introducing new legislation to compel him to seek that extension rather earlier. In fact, from as early as next week. Maybe they say, we don't trust you to behave yourself. We don't trust you to seek the extension. We're going to force you to do it sooner rather than later. And that's what I mean by hastening his humiliation. Because once they've got that out of him, once they've got the extension, they've got two things. First of all, they've got the extension. He then, doesn't matter when the general election is, he can't dissolve Parliament at a time that allows him to take us out with no deal. That won't be able to happen. And second of all, they will have completely laid bare the fact that he has to dance to their tune. Superb. So either of those would be okay, but I definitely think they should think about, with the general election, doing it as a bill and not via any of the Fixed Terms Parliament Act routes, because definitely get some younger people voting, is my advice. And if you know some young people, do get them to register, please. Remember, you can even register if you're 17, so that you are definitely registered, even if the election day is on your 18th birthday. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.